The Maya Collapse, a bedtime history. Settle in, close your eyes, let yourself drift as we journey back through time to a world of towering pyramids rising above the jungle canopy, to cities that hummed with life for centuries before falling silent, leaving only stone and shadow behind. The world before the silence. Imagine, if you will, the year 750 CE. The sun rises over the Bedtime rainforest of what we now call Guatemala, casting golden light through morning mist. Howler monkeys call from the canopy. Parrots flash brilliant colors between mahogany branches. And there, emerging from the jungle like mountains built by human hands, stand the great cities of the Maya. Tikal, Calicmo, Capan, Palenque, Caracol. These are not small settlements. These are metropolises. Tikal alone spreads across 16 square miles, home to perhaps 60,000 souls, with another 90,000 living in the surrounding countryside. Its temple pyramids rise 200 feet into the air, taller than a 20-story building, constructed without metal tools, without the wheel, without beasts of burden. Walk through Tikal's great plaza in this golden age, and your senses would be overwhelmed. The smell of copal incense drifts from temple doorways. Bright murals cover palace walls, nobles in jaguar pelts and quetzal feathers, glyphs telling stories of kings and gods. In the marketplaces, traders speak a dozen dialects, exchanging obsidian from the highlands, jade from the Motagua Valley, cacao from the coastal regions, salt from the northern shores. The Maya have built their civilization across a landscape that stretches from the highlands of Chiapas to the limestone plains of Yucatan, from the Pacific coast to the Caribbean. It is a world of city-states, each ruled by a Kayuhul Ajo, a divine lord, who traces his lineage back through time, through generations, to the gods themselves. These divine lords sit atop steep pyramids, their power radiating downward through layers of nobles, priests, scribes, artisans, warriors, farmers. They commission stone monuments called stelae that record their victories, their rituals, their place in the cosmic order. They build ball courts where athletes play a sacred game that reenacts the myth of the hero twins who descended into the underworld. They construct observatories to track Venus, the moon, the movements of stars across the night sky. The Maya have been here for millennia. Their ancestors first settled these lands before 2000 BCE, cultivating maize in forest clearings, learning to work with the jungle rather than against it. By 250 CE, the classic period had begun, a golden age of art, architecture, mathematics, and astronomy that would last for 6 centuries. They developed the most sophisticated writing system in the pre-Columbian Americas, a script of elegant glyphs that could record history, poetry, prophecy. They created a calendar more accurate than the one used in Europe at the same time. They understood the concept of zero before it reached the Mediterranean world. They built systems to capture rainwater, carved canals through swamps, terraced hillsides for farming. But let us focus on one city, one place where you can rest your mind as we tell this story. Let us visit Capan, in what is now western Honduras, near the border with Guatemala. Capan, a city at its height. Close your eyes and walk with me through Capan in the year 738 CE. Feel the warmth of the tropical sun on your skin. Hear the rustle of palm fronds in the breeze. Capan sits in a river valley, surrounded by green mountains. The Capan River flows past the city's edge, its water clear and cool. The Maya have modified the riverbanks, lining them with cut stone to prevent flooding, channeling water where they need it. The city center is a marvel of architectural ambition. The Acropolis rises in terraced levels, temples stacked upon temples, palaces connected by interior stairways and courtyards. The stone is covered in white plaster that gleams in sunlight. Everywhere you look, there is sculpture, carved facades showing the rain god Chak with his serpentine features, the maize god emerging from the earth, cosmic monsters with gaping jaws. The great plaza stretches before you, a vast open space paved with stones, large enough to hold thousands of people during ceremonies. Around its edges stand stelae, stone monuments 12 feet tall, carved on all four sides with images of kings in elaborate regalia. These portraits are so lifelike, so detailed, that scholars centuries later will call them the finest sculpture in the ancient Americas. King Waxaclajan Abakayawiyo, whose name means 18 are the images of Kayawiyo, has ruled Kapan for these past 4 decades. Under his reign, the city has flourished. He has commissioned most of these stelae you see around the plaza, each one marking a Kayatan, a period of 20 years in the Maya calendar. He has expanded the city's influence, forging alliances with neighboring centers, demanding tribute from smaller settlements. He has built the hieroglyphic stairway, a monumental structure unique in the Maya world. 63 stone steps rise to a temple doorway, and every single step is carved with glyphs, more than 2,200 individual signs, telling the history of Kapan's dynasty, celebrating its kings, recording their triumphs over enemies. It is the longest text surviving from ancient Mesoamerica, a book written in stone. But walk now through the residential areas beyond the ceremonial center, where ordinary people live. Here the houses are simpler, platforms of earth and stone supporting pole and thatch structures. Yet even here there is artistry. Ceramic vessels are painted with intricate designs. Small shrines hold offerings to household gods. Gardens grow squash, beans, chili peppers, amaranth. Farmers wake before dawn to tend their milpas, maize fields cleared from the forest. They work with fire and stone axes, burning sections of jungle, planting seeds in the ashen-rich soil. Maize is sacred, the substance from which the gods made human flesh. Every kernel is precious. Every harvest is a blessing. The milpa system is ancient wisdom. Plant maize, beans, and squash together, the 3 sisters. The maize stalks provide support for climbing bean vines. The beans fix nitrogen in the soil, feeding the maize. The squash spreads along the ground, its broad leaves shading out weeds, keeping moisture in the earth. Together, they provide complete nutrition, carbohydrates, protein, vitamins. But the milpa system requires something the Maya have in limited supply: land. After 2 or 3 years, the nutrients in the soil deplete. The field must lie fallow for 7 to 10 years while the forest reclaims it, rebuilding the nutrients in fallen leaves and decaying wood. This means farmers need access to large territories to rotate their fields, letting old plots rest while cultivating new ones. And here in this detail about farming lies a seed of the story we must tell, the story of how this magnificent civilization, after flourishing for centuries, would unravel. But not yet. For now, rest here in Kapan. Listen to the sounds of the city, the grinding of maize on stone metates, the laughter of children playing in courtyards, the calls of vendors in the market, the drums and flutes from a temple ceremony. Feel the peace of a civilization at its zenith, unaware that it stands on the edge of a precipice. The warning signs. The year is 738 CE. King Waxaclajan Abakayawiyo has just dedicated another stela. The ceremony was magnificent, dancers in jaguar costumes, priests burning copal incense, sacrificial offerings to the gods. The king appeared before his people in his full regalia, jade pectorals, quetzal feather headdress towering 5 feet above his head, the symbols of power carried by attendants, the double-headed serpent bar, the jade-studded shield. But something goes wrong. Quaragaha, a smaller city that has long been under Kapan's dominance, has grown restless. Its ambitious ruler, Kayak Tullo Chen Yupat, Fa Burning Sky Lightning Gud, has been building alliances, strengthening his military, preparing for rebellion. Perhaps he has support from Kilikmal, the great superpower to the north, always ready to undermine its rival Tikal and Tikal's allies like Kapan. In May of 738 CE, Kayak Tullo Chen Yupat strikes. His warriors ambush Waxaclajan Abakayawiyo, capture him, and bring him back to Quaragaha in chains. There, in a ritual designed to humiliate Kapan and elevate Quaragaha, they behead him. The news spreads through the Maya world like wildfire. A divine lord, a king who claimed descent from the gods themselves, has been captured and executed by a vassal. The cosmic order has been violated, or perhaps revealed as less stable than people believed. Kapun continues, of course. A new king rises to power. The city recovers from the shock, but something has changed, something subtle. The certainty, the confidence, the sense of divine mandate, it has been shaken. And this is just one city, one crisis. Zoom out from Kapun, let your mind's eye rise above the jungle canopy, and you'll see similar tensions playing out across the Maya lowlands. The cities have been growing for centuries. More people means more mouths to feed. Farmers push their fields farther into the forest, reduce the fallow periods, try to squeeze more harvests from depleted soil. The great cities compete for resources, for trade routes, for prestige. They wage wars not just for captives to sacrifice, but for territory, for tribute, for survival. Look at the inscriptions from this period, the texts carved on monuments and painted in codices. Count how often the glyph for war appears, the symbol of a star falling over a place name, meaning star wa, an assault, a conquest. In the late classic period, warfare intensifies. Raids become more frequent. Captives are taken and sacrificed in growing numbers. The population has reached levels the land can barely sustain. Paleoecological studies, examinations of ancient pollen preserved in lake sediments, show that by 800 CE, the forest has been cleared for miles around major centers. The landscape would have looked more like farmland dotted with woodlots than the dense jungle we see today. And there's another problem, one the Maya cannot see, but that scientists studying ancient climate data would discover centuries later. The rains are becoming less reliable. Let yourself drift now, floating above the centuries, watching the patterns emerge. Imagine time as a river, and you're observing its currents from above. Around the year 760 CE, the first of several severe droughts begins to affect the Maya lowlands. The rains that usually arrive in May are delayed. When they come, they're insufficient. Springs that normally flow year-round begin to run dry in the hot season. In a normal year, Kapun receives about 70 inches of rain. Most of it falls between May and November. The Maya have engineered their cities to capture every precious drop, catch basins, reservoirs, plastered surfaces that channel water into storage tanks. But these systems assume normal rainfall. When the rains fail for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in a row, the reservoirs run low, then dry. The first drought lasts from roughly 760 to 780 CE. Then conditions improve for a while, just long enough for hope to return. Then comes another dry period from 810 to 820. And then the worst drought of all begins around 835 CE and persists, with brief respites, until sometime after 900 CE. But you don't need to remember these dates. Just understand, the rains failed. The droughts came in waves, each one lasting years, and between them the recovery periods grew shorter. For the Maya, drought is not just a practical problem, it's a spiritual crisis. The king's primary duty is to ensure cosmic order, to perform the rituals that keep the universe in balance, that ensure the rains come and the maize grows. When drought persists despite all ceremonies, despite all sacrifices, what does that mean? Are the gods angry? Is the king failing in his duties? Has the lineage lost its divine mandate? The unraveling begins. Picture a farmer in the countryside near Tikal in the year 800 CE. Let's call him Uxkan, sun face. He's a composite character, but his story reflects what archaeological evidence suggests happened to thousands of real people. Uxkan has worked his family's land for decades. His father showed him where to clear fields, which plots to plant, when to let them lie fallow. But in recent years, everything has become harder. The spring rains came late 2 years ago, and the maize only grew waist-high before the dry season withered it. Last year was better, but this year the rains have failed completely. It's July now, and the earth is cracked and dusty. His family's reservoir, a plastered pit that usually holds enough water to last through the dry season, is nearly empty. The women walk farther each day to fetch water from a dwindling spring. The stored maize from last year's harvest won't last until the next one, if there is a next one. And still the lords in the city demand tribute. Warriors come to collect maize, beans, cacao, cloth, the same amounts as always, as if nothing has changed. Ux Khan wants to refuse, but what can he do? The lords have the power of the gods behind them, or so they claim. But maybe they don't. Maybe the proof is in the sky that refuses to release its rain, in the earth that refuses to yield its bounty. Ux Khan hears rumors from travelers. Other cities are struggling too. In some places, people are leaving, abandoning their homes, moving north toward the coast or into the highlands where there might be more water. Some say the lords are fighting among themselves, blaming each other for the divine displeasure. One night, Ixkayin makes a decision. He gathers his family, his wife, his 3 children who survived infancy, his aging mother. They pack what they can carry: a few ceramic pots, stone tools, seed corn they've hidden from the tribute collectors. Before dawn, they slip away from the house their family has occupied for generations. They head north toward rumors of a city called Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, where they say there are cenotes, deep sinkholes filled with water that never runs dry. The journey will take weeks, maybe months. They might not survive it, but staying means slow starvation. This scene, the quiet abandonment in the pre-dawn darkness, repeats thousands of times across the Maya lowlands between 800 and 900 CE. Archaeological surveys show the rural population declining first, before the cities themselves are affected. People vote with their feet, leaving for anywhere that might offer better prospects. The cities begin to feel the strain. With fewer farmers working the land, tribute revenues fall. There's less food coming into urban centers. The nobles and their dependents, the priests, the scribes, the artisans, the warriors, all depend on the surplus produced by rural labor. When that surplus shrinks, the whole elaborate structure of civilization begins to tremble. Some cities try to solve the problem through war. If your own lands can't support your population, you conquer your neighbor's lands. But your neighbor has the same idea, and soon everyone is fighting everyone else in an increasingly desperate scramble for dwindling resources. The inscriptions from this period tell stories of accelerating violence. In 790 CE, Deux Pilas in the Bedtime is overrun and burned. Its population tears down its own monuments to build a defensive wall, a desperate, futile gesture. Other cities fortify themselves, building walls for the first time in their histories. Cities that once spent their wealth on pyramids and palaces now spend it on fortifications. King Kayak Tiliuchan Yapat of Quirigua, who executed Kapan's king back in 738, commissions a series of enormous stelae, the largest stone monuments in the Maya world. One stands 35 feet tall and weighs 65 tons. It's an astonishing feat of engineering, carving, and raising such stones. But one wonders, as resources grow scarcer, as crisis looms, is this the wisest use of labor? Or is it a desperate assertion of power and prestige by a king who feels his authority slipping away? At Kapan, the dynasty continues, but with less confidence. The later kings don't commission monuments on the scale of their predecessors. The last stela erected at Kapan dates to 822 CE. After that, silence. Let that sink in. A tradition of monument building that lasted 500 years simply stops. No more texts carved in stone, recording the exploits of kings. No more portraits of divine lords in their elaborate regalia. Either there are no kings left to commemorate, or they lack the resources to create monuments, or perhaps people have simply lost faith in the whole system. The collapse at Tikal. Breathe slowly. Let the story wash over you like waves on a distant shore. We're going to visit Tikal now, the greatest of the classic Maya cities, and watch as it falls silent. Tikal, which means place of voices or place of tongues, has been a major power for 6 centuries. Its temples dominate the landscape. Temple IV, completed around 741 CE, stands 212 feet tall, the tallest pre-Columbian structure in the Americas. From its summit, you can see other pyramids rising above the jungle canopy miles away, the peaks of a stone forest. But by 800 CE, Tikal is in trouble. The rural population has been declining for decades. The agricultural base that supports the city is eroding. Food is scarce. The reservoirs, which in normal times hold enough water for tens of thousands of people, are inadequate during prolonged droughts. Some scholars believe Tikal's population reached 90 to 100,000 at its peak. Imagine trying to feed that many people when the rains fail, when harvests are poor year after year. Imagine the social stress, the tensions between well-fed elites living in palaces and starving commoners in the outer districts. The last dated monument at Tikal is Stela 11, erected in 869 CE. It commemorates a cat-ending ceremony, a ritual that had been performed at Tikal for centuries. The king who commissioned it was named Jasochan Kayawil II. He appears on the stela in traditional regalia, performing traditional rites, as if everything were normal, as if the old order still held. But this is the last such monument. After 869, no more stelae are erected at Tikal. No more texts are carved. The inscriptions that had chronicled Tikal's history for so long simply cease. This doesn't mean the city was immediately abandoned. Archaeological evidence suggests people continued living at Tikal for several more decades, perhaps as late as 950 CE. But they were no longer building monuments, no longer maintaining the temples, no longer performing the great state rituals that had defined Maya civilization. Imagine Tikal in 900 CE. The great temples still stand, but some are showing signs of neglect. A tree has taken root on top of one pyramid, its roots working into cracks in the stone. The plaster facades are weathering, the painted surface is fading. The great plaza, which once hosted ceremonies attended by thousands, is empty except for scattered groups of squatters living in the abandoned palaces. The elite culture, the scripts, the calendrics, the royal rituals, has collapsed. But people still live here, eking out a living, farming in the shadow of monuments they no longer understand, built by ancestors whose names are already fading into legend. And then eventually, even these remnant populations leave or die out. By 950 CE, perhaps by 1000 CE, Tikal is abandoned entirely. The jungle moves in quickly. Vines climb the pyramids, trees sprout from roof combs, animals make dens in the palace chambers. Within a century, the forest has swallowed everything. A city that housed tens of thousands becomes the silent domain of howler monkeys and jaguars. Let yourself imagine that scene, the great city returning to jungle, not destroyed by war, not buried by volcanic eruption, not swept away by flood, just abandoned, left to the forest, as if the thousands of people who lived there simply walked away and never came back. Because that's essentially what happened. The pattern repeats. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow. We're going to step back and see the bigger picture now, watching as city after city across the southern Maya lowlands follows the same trajectory. It doesn't happen all at once. The collapse unfolds over approximately 2 centuries, from roughly 750 to 950 CE, with different cities falling at different times. Some cities in the southern lowlands, the Bedtime region of Guatemala, northern Honduras, Belize, southern Yucatan collapse early. Dos Pilas is abandoned around 800 CE. Piedras Negras falls silent around 810. Capon's last dated monument is 822 CE. Quiriguaz is 810. Palenque, that jewel of Maya art in the western lowlands, declines after 799. Tikal, as we've seen, struggles on until around 869 CE for its last monument, with some residual occupation afterward. Calakmul, the other great superpower, meets a similar fate. Caracal in Belize, a city that once defeated Tikal in battle, erects its last monument around 859 CE. Naranjo, another major center, falls silent around 820 CE. One by one, the great cities of the classic Maya go dark. The lights of civilization, the ceremonial fires, the market bustle, the temple rituals wink out across the southern lowlands. By 950 CE, the transformation is complete. An area that once supported millions of people has reverted largely to forest. The population has plummeted. Estimates suggest a decline of perhaps 90% in some regions. The survivors are scattered in small villages, living simple lives with little connection to the grandeur of the classic period. Let this sink in. A civilization as sophisticated as any in the ancient world, with monumental architecture, complex writing, advanced astronomy and mathematics, simply unraveled. The cities were not destroyed from outside. There was no conquering empire that swept through and put everyone to the sword. The Maya did this to themselves, or rather, a combination of factors, environmental, social, political, combined to create a perfect storm of collapse. But here's something crucial to understand. Not all Maya cities collapsed. The disaster was largely confined to the southern lowlands. In the northern Yucatan, cities not only survived but flourished in the terminal classic and post-classic periods. Chichen Itza, which we mentioned earlier when our imaginary farmer fled north, became a major power after 800 CE. Its architecture shows influences from central Mexico, blending Maya traditions with elements from other cultures. The site remains occupied and powerful until the 1200s. Uxmal, another northern city, reaches its peak after the southern cities have collapsed. Its architecture, the Pyramid of the Magician, the Governor's Palace, represents some of the finest Maya building, all constructed during the period when the southern lowlands were emptying. Later, after Chichen Itza's decline, Mayapan becomes the dominant power in the north, lasting until the 1440s, and coastal cities like Cholum thrive on maritime trade, remaining occupied even when the Spanish arrive in the 1500s. So when we speak of the Maya collapse, we need to be precise. It's the collapse of classic Maya civilization in the southern lowlands, the end of a particular political system, a particular cultural fluorescence in a particular region. The Maya people didn't disappear. They persisted, adapted, migrated, rebuilt. There are over 7 million Maya people alive today, speaking 24 Maya languages, maintaining traditions that stretch back millennia. But the classic Maya civilization of the southern lowlands, with its elaborate royal dynasties and towering pyramids, did collapse. And understanding why requires us to examine the complex interplay of factors that brought it down. The web of causes. Settle deeper into comfort. Let your muscles relax. We're going to explore now the various theories about why the collapse happened, the factors that wove together into a pattern of decline. Scholars have been debating this question since the ruins were rediscovered by outsiders in the 1800s. Early theories were often simplistic: foreign invasion, epidemic disease, peasant revolt, soil exhaustion. Each theory captured part of the truth but missed the bigger picture. Modern scholarship recognizes that the collapse was multi-causal, the result of multiple factors that reinforced each other in devastating feedback loops. Let's examine these factors one by one, gently, like turning pages in an ancient book. Drought, we've already discussed this. Paleoclimate data from lake sediments, cave formations, and ocean sediments shows that the Maya lowlands experienced several severe droughts between 760 and 930 CE. These weren't single-year droughts but multi-year dry periods lasting a decade or more. The worst drought began around 835 CE and lasted with fluctuations until after 900 CE. Measurements of oxygen isotopes in cave formations from Belize suggest rainfall during this period was 40% below normal. Springs that normally flowed year-round ran dry. Water levels in lakes dropped dramatically. For a civilization dependent on rainfall agriculture, without large permanent rivers, this was catastrophic. The Maya did have water management technology, reservoirs, catch basins, canals, but these systems could only buffer against normal dry season variations, not multi-year droughts. Overpopulation and environmental degradation. By 800 CE, the Maya lowlands were densely populated. Estimates vary, but the southern lowlands may have supported 3 to 14 million people at the peak, an astonishing density for a tropical forest environment. This population was sustained by intensive agriculture. The Maya cleared forests for fields, shortened fallow periods to squeeze more harvest from the land, built terraces on hillsides, and drained wetlands for farming. These techniques worked for centuries, but they had ecological costs. Deforestation led to soil erosion. When tropical soil loses its forest cover, heavy rains wash away the thin layer of nutrients. The cleared land becomes less productive over time. Shortened fallow periods meant soil didn't have time to recover between plantings. Studies of lake sediments show a massive increase in erosion during the late Classic period. The Maya were literally washing away the foundation of their agriculture. At the same time, they were exhausting the soil's nutrients, reducing crop yields even in good rainfall years. Some scholars believe the Maya lowlands had reached or exceeded their carrying capacity, the maximum population the environment could sustainably support. When drought struck, there was no buffer, no surplus to draw on. The system was operating at maximum stress, and drought pushed it over the edge. Warfare. As resources became scarcer, competition intensified. The late Classic period saw escalating warfare between Maya city-states. Inscriptions record battles, captures, executions. Defensive walls appear around cities for the first time. But this wasn't just competition for glory or captives for sacrifice. It was competition for survival, for control of productive land and water sources. Warfare is both a symptom and a cause of collapse. Scarcity led to conflict, and conflict made scarcity worse by disrupting agriculture, displacing populations, consuming resources in military ventures rather than productive activities. Some cities were destroyed or severely damaged in wars. Dos Pilas, as mentioned, was overrun and abandoned. The resulting refugee movements put pressure on other cities, spreading the crisis. Political fragmentation. The Maya political system was decentralized, a patchwork of competing city-states, each ruled by a divine lord claiming cosmic authority. This system worked well in times of prosperity. Different cities could specialize, trade, maintain relationships of alliance and subordination. But when crisis struck, the system became a liability. There was no central authority to coordinate response, to redistribute resources from surplus areas to deficit areas, to organize collective action. Each city-state pursued its own survival, often at the expense of neighbors. Moreover, the legitimacy of the divine lords rested on their ability to maintain cosmic order. When droughts persisted despite rituals, when the gods seemed deaf to prayers and sacrifices, people began questioning the system. If the king couldn't bring rain, what good was he? Some scholars argue this led to a crisis of legitimacy. The elite culture, the monuments, the rituals, the scribal tradition, collapsed because people lost faith in it. Why support a parasitic elite that consumed resources but delivered nothing? Trade disruption. The classic Maya civilization was integrated into long-distance trade networks. Obsidian from highland Guatemala, jade from the Motagua Valley, marine shells from the coasts, cacao and salt and textiles. All these goods moved along trade routes connecting hundreds of cities. As cities collapsed, these trade networks broke down. A city that depended on imported obsidian for tools found supplies drying up. Markets shrank. The economic integration that had allowed specialization and sustained urban populations unraveled. Trade disruption may have been particularly devastating for inland cities. Coastal communities could turn to marine resources, fish, shellfish, salt production, maritime trade. Inland cities had fewer options when their hinterlands could no longer support them. Disease. There's limited evidence for epidemic disease playing a major role in the collapse, but it can't be ruled out. Skeletal remains from the late Classic show signs of nutritional stress, which would have weakened immune systems. Drought conditions, crowding, warfare-related displacement, all these factors could have facilitated disease spread. Yellow fever, which is endemic in the region, might have become more virulent. Intestinal parasites would have proliferated as water quality deteriorated. Even if there wasn't a single devastating epidemic, the cumulative burden of endemic diseases in a stressed population could have pushed mortality rates higher. Elite maladaptation. Some scholars argue that Maya elites made poor choices that worsened the crisis. Instead of reducing consumption, investing in water management, or addressing agricultural problems, they continued building monuments, conducting expensive rituals, and waging wars. The enormous stelae erected at Quirigua in the late 700s, for instance, required months of labor by hundreds of workers, all to aggrandize a single king. Imagine if that labor had instead been directed to building better reservoirs or terracing more farmland. Elite competition for prestige may have intensified as resources dwindled, with lords trying to outdo each other in displays of wealth and power, burning through scarce resources on vanity projects while their population starved. This isn't to say Maya elites were stupid or evil. They were trapped in a system where their legitimacy depended on displays of divine power, and where each lord had to keep up with his rivals or risk appearing weak. But the incentive structure was maladaptive in crisis conditions. The cascade. Rest your mind. Imagine these factors not as separate things but as threads in a web, each connected to all the others. Pull on one thread and the whole web trembles. Drought reduces crop yields. Lower yields mean less surplus. Less surplus means cities can't support as many non-farmers. Artisans, priests, scribes, warriors, all depend on farmers producing more than they consume. When surpluses shrink, urban populations must shrink too. But cities don't shrink gracefully. Elites resist cutting their own consumption. They demand the same tributes from a shrinking agricultural base, squeezing farmers harder. Overburdened farmers abandon their land, flee to other regions. This reduces production further, tightening the spiral. As cities weaken, warfare intensifies. Weak cities are attacked by stronger neighbors trying to seize their resources. Warfare disrupts planting and harvest, displaces populations, destroys infrastructure. This worsens the agricultural crisis, which triggers more conflict. Trade breaks down as cities fall, cutting off access to essential goods. Without obsidian, people can't make tools. Without salt, they can't preserve food. Without cacao, they can't conduct certain rituals. The economic system fragments into isolated pockets barely above subsistence level. As the crisis deepens, disease spreads through malnourished, stressed populations. Mortality rises, especially among children and the elderly. The population that survives is smaller, sicker, less able to maintain complex systems. Eventually, people simply leave. Why stay in a city where the reservoirs are empty, the markets bare, the temples no longer hosting ceremonies? Why support a king who can't make it rain? Better to move north to the coast, to the highlands, anywhere there might be water and land. The exodus becomes self-reinforcing. As people leave, cities lose critical mass. A city with 50,000 people can support specialist artisans, professional scribes, full-time priests. A city with 5,000 cannot. The institutional knowledge that maintained complex systems, the calendar, the script, the astronomical observations, depends on specialists who can devote their lives to it. When those specialists disperse or die without apprentices to replace them, the knowledge dies with them. Imagine the last scribe at Tikal, an old man who learned the glyphs from his father, who learned from his father going back generations. He has no students. The young people have all left, seeking better prospects elsewhere. When he dies, the ability to read and write the ancient script dies with him. The monuments still stand, covered in texts, but within a generation no one living can decipher them. This is how civilizations end, not with a bang but with a whimper, with the quiet departure of the last people who maintained its traditions, leaving only stones and silence. The view from above. Let's step back one more time, rising above the story like a bird catching a thermal, seeing the whole arc of classic Maya civilization from beginning to end. Around 250 CE, the classic period begins. Cities grow, population increases, trade networks expand, art and architecture flourish. The Maya script becomes more sophisticated. Kings commission monuments recording their deeds. The calendar is perfected. Astronomical observations are precise enough to predict eclipses centuries in advance. This is a golden age, lasting for 5 centuries. But growth has limits. By 700 CE, the population is pressing against what the environment can support. Forests are cleared. Soil is eroding. The buffer between population and resources is thin. The system is fragile, though no one realizes it yet. The cities still seem prosperous. The temples still tower over the jungle. Then the droughts come around 760 CE. The first one is bad, but the system survives. There's still enough resilience, enough surplus stored away, enough institutional capacity to weather the crisis. But the drought returns, and returns again. Each time, recovery is slower. Each time, the resilience is a little less. By 800 CE, the southern lowlands are in freefall. Cities are depopulating. Monuments are no longer being erected. Warfare is endemic. The trade system is fragmenting. And still the rains don't come. The crisis peaks between 835 and 900 CE. This is when most of the major cities collapse, when the royal dynasties end, when the script and calendar fall out of use. It's like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, each city triggering the collapse of its neighbors, the whole system unraveling. By 950 CE, it's over. The great cities of the southern lowlands are abandoned or occupied by remnant populations living in the ruins. The forest is reclaiming the pyramids. Jaguars hunt where kings once held court. The Maya civilization hasn't ended. It continues in the northern Yucatan, adapts, transforms. But the classic Maya civilization of the southern lowlands is gone, collapsed under the weight of its own success, killed by drought and internal contradictions. Lessons from the ruins. You're drifting now, on the edge of sleep. Let the story settle into your mind like sediment at the bottom of a lake, layer upon layer of history compressing into meaning. What can we learn from the Maya collapse? What does it teach us about civilizations, about human societies, about the relationship between people and their environment? First, that success can sow the seeds of failure. The very achievements that allowed the Maya to flourish, intensive agriculture, population growth, urban centers, political complexity, made them vulnerable when conditions changed. The more complex the system, the more things that can go wrong. Second, that environmental limits are real. The Maya were brilliant engineers and farmers, but they couldn't make it rain. They pushed their agricultural systems to the limit and beyond, and when drought struck, the system collapsed. No amount of ritual, no sacrifices to the gods could change the basic equation. Too many people, too little water degraded land. Third, that political fragmentation can be fatal in a crisis. The Maya city-states competed when they needed to cooperate. They fought each other when they needed to unite. The decentralized system that worked well in prosperity became a death trap in scarcity. Fourth, that elites can be part of the problem. Maya lords continued demanding resources for monuments and ceremonies while their population starved. They clung to a system that no longer served anyone because the system served them, until it collapsed entirely and took their privileged positions with it. Fifth, that collapse is a process, not an event. It took 2 centuries for classic Maya civilization to unravel completely. There were opportunities for different choices, for adaptation, for pulling back from the brink. But the forces driving collapse, ecological, social, political, reinforced each other in a feedback loop that became impossible to escape. Sixth, that collapse isn't the end. The Maya survived. They adapted. They built new societies in new places. The descendants of the people who abandoned Tikal and Kapan still live in Central America, still speak Maya languages, still maintain cultural traditions thousands of years old. Civilizations can collapse, but people endure. And finally, perhaps, that we should pay attention. The Maya collapse happened long ago and far away, but the patterns are relevant today. A civilization pushing environmental limits, growing populations competing for scarce resources, political systems unable to coordinate collective action, elites pursuing short-term interests while long-term sustainability erodes. The Maya couldn't see the whole pattern because they were inside it, living day to day, making choices that seemed rational at the time. We have the advantage of hindsight, of seeing how their story ended. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from it, to see the patterns before it's too late, to make different choices. Walking through Tikal today. Let's return to Tikal one last time, not as it was in its glory days, but as it exists today. You walk along a path through the jungle, the air thick with humidity, alive with the calls of birds and monkeys. The path is dirt and stone, climbing gently upward. And then you emerge into a clearing, and before you rises a pyramid. Temple I, the temple of the great jaguar, soars above you, a stepped pyramid crowned with a roof comb, climbing toward the canopy. It was built around 732 CE to house the tomb of King Jasochan Kawil I, Tikal's great restorer. He's buried deep inside, in a vaulted chamber surrounded by offerings, jade, shells, pottery vessels painted with glyphs. The pyramid is magnificent, overwhelming. It's been cleared of vegetation, stabilized by archaeologists, partially restored. You can climb the wooden stairs that ascend the front face, though it's steep and your legs burn and your heart pounds. From the top, you see the other temples rising from the jungle. Temple II across the plaza, Temple III to the west, Temple IV to the northwest, the tallest of them all, its roof comb visible above the canopy. The great plaza spreads below you, where tens of thousands once gathered for ceremonies. But here's what you mostly see: trees. The jungle spreading in every direction, a sea of green. Only the very tops of the pyramids break the surface, like islands in a green ocean. The city that's been cleared and stabilized for tourists, the central ceremonial district, a few palaces, some residential groups. This is perhaps 5% of Tikal. The rest remains buried in jungle, mounds of stone covered with earth and vegetation, the footprints of thousands of houses visible only in subtle contours in the forest floor. Beneath your feet, if you could see through the ground, are layer upon layer of construction. The Maya built their temples on top of older temples, palaces on top of older palaces, each generation constructing atop the work of their ancestors. Inside Temple I, entombed beneath the version you see, are earlier versions of the pyramid, nested like Russian dolls. This is what remains: magnificent ruins, fragments of a vanished world, beautiful and melancholy and vast. The structures have survived 1,000 years of weather, roots, decay. But the city that gave them meaning, the people, the ceremonies, the daily life of markets and courtyards, the smell of copal incense and cooking fires, the sounds of flutes and drums and voices raised in prayer, that's gone, survived only in archaeology and inscriptions. As you descend from the temple, as you walk back through the jungle toward the modern world, you might reflect on what you've seen. A civilization rose here, flourished for centuries, created works of astonishing beauty and sophistication, and then failed. Not because the people were inferior or doomed, but because they faced problems they couldn't solve within the constraints of their system. The ruins speak to us across time, saying, "We were here, we built this, we thought it would last forever. Remember us, learn from us." And then the jungle closes in behind you, and the ruins disappear again into green shadow, waiting silently for the next visitors to stumble upon them and wonder at what they meant. Sleep now. You're very tired now. Your breathing is slow and deep. The story is settling into your unconscious mind, becoming part of your dreams. Imagine yourself lying on a stone terrace in Kapan under a tropical night sky. The stars above you are the same stars the Maya watched, mapping their movements, recording their cycles. You hear the distant calls of night birds, the rustle of palm fronds in the breeze. The city around you is empty, silent, peaceful. No one demands anything of you. No obligations, no struggles, no urgent crises. Just the warmth of stone that's absorbed the day's sun, slowly releasing it into the night. Just the vastness of the sky above and the ancient earth below. You think about time, about how civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean, each one thinking it will last forever, each one eventually returning to silence. The Maya had their moment. We have ours. Someday, archaeologists might sift through our ruins, trying to understand what we built and why it fell. But that's distant, abstract. Right now, all that matters is this moment, the stone beneath you, the sky above, the slow rhythm of your breath. You're safe, you're comfortable, you're exactly where you need to be. Let the images from the story drift through your mind. Towering pyramids, green jungle, carved stele, kings in quetzal feathers. Let them flow past like clouds, requiring nothing from you, just there to observe as you sink deeper into rest. The Maya built their temples as mountains, connecting earth to sky, the realm of humans to the realm of gods. You're on that threshold now, between waking and sleep, between the conscious world and the world of dreams. It's a peaceful place, this threshold. Nothing can harm you here. Somewhere deep in the Bedtime jungle, a howler monkey calls. The sound echoes through the forest, bouncing off ancient stones, fading into darkness. The trees grow. The rains come. The sun rises. Life continues, cycle after cycle, season after season. And you're part of that continuity, that ancient pattern. Breathing in, breathing out. Waking and sleeping. Rising and falling like civilizations, like waves, like the patient breath of the world itself. Sleep now. Let the story of the Maya carry you into dreams, into the deep peace of a tropical night, into the timeless silence of ruins waiting in the jungle for 1,000 years. Sleep well.